Now I know what you're thinking. Christian von Carmian, I play competitive games, not fluffy wuffy cuddle narrative games. And there's another issue with Crusade games. You need to have friends. I paused for too long. No, leave it in. You need to have friends that will play Crusade games consistently with you, perhaps for months. If you just play pickup games of Warhammer 40,000, or you or your regular opponent switch between factions all of the time, that's a bit harder to start. So that is why I titled this, Why You Should Play Crusade Missions in Competitive Games. There is a difference that I'll get to, but since you brought up narrative campaigns, that's where I'll start. What is Crusade? Unlike with Kill Team, Crusade is not a different rule set that uses Warhammer 40,000 models. It is an additional set of rules on top of regular 40k. If the Mordheim or Necromunda game system with its leveling up and getting better equipment sounded cool, but no one around you wanted to play, they just play 40k, Crusade is a good solution. What you have is a Crusade Army. This is made up of the units you want to play with and you want to level up. You start with 1000 points. Now think of this in tiers. The top tier is every model that you own. Next is the units on your Crusade roster, your Order of Battle or Crusade Force. These are the ones taking part in the Crusade battles. They just need to have one keyword in common, like Imperium. So you can have a Crusade roster of Custodes, Dark Angels and Imperial Guard as they are all Imperium. However, when it comes to battles, you take units from your Crusade roster to make a Crusade army, and that has to conform to a lot of the normal 40k list building, so just Imperial Guard units in an Imperial Guard army. Now maybe you upgraded your Crusade roster to be 2,500 points. If you're playing a 2,000 point game, you will pick 2,000 points you want to play in that coming game's Crusade army. Your units gain experience points from completing missions and killing enemy units. They get after action rewards when they level up. Then they can get a bonus ability, a weapon upgrade, or and if they die, may get a scar. A mostly permanent penalty in the future because of that time they were wiped out by a Termagant's gimpy claw. It adds that role-playing game element that older Warhammer 40,000 games had. It can be as simple or as complex as you want. You can just play missions one at a time with no fixed end that lets you level up your army, or in the codexes you can be part of a grand narrative. So the Adeptus Sororitas follow the rise, the greatness, and then the martyrdom of a living saint. The Genestealer cult slowly infiltrates parts of a planetary government and tries not to get caught in the process. Otherwise, Ascension Day is forced early. If you have Imperial agents, they follow their own story in Crusade and try to stop threats to the Imperium, and oh my word, Greyfax has Celestine fan art on her desk. This is canon. This is from Games Workshop. You know that she's mentally planning their wedding right now. That's why she needs to get rid of all the threats in the galaxy, so she can have a calm and peaceful wedding without some chaos cult bursting in and saying, I object. And then getting killed because you don't have a wedding in the 41st millennium without a few burning heretics. It should be mentioned that characters with the epic hero keyword like Celestine and Greyfax, they don't level up and get bonuses. They have their own canonical and shippable story. This was a problem with the Index Patriarch of the Genestealer cult having epic hero. He couldn't get enhancements or bonuses in Crusade despite not being unique in the galaxy. There are many Patriarchs. If you're not super keen on that narrative side, but you are someone that like going really deep into one faction and are pining for the feards of 9th edition, Crusade can work for you. If you like 9th edition with the absurd number of rules that every faction got, Crusade can re-add that complexity into 10th edition for you. And if you like that 9th edition had faction-specific secondary missions instead of random card draws, Crusade has agendas. They work much the same. They don't give you in-game victory points, they give your models experience points. Battle Sisters defend shrines on the battlefield, and Space Marine agendas continue their army special rule of fluff that guy in particular. If you haven't got faction-specific ones because your codex isn't out yet, there are still loads of agendas in the Crusade books for anyone to use. If you're much more into casual games, you get a fun story to go along with your models. Your guys, the cool part of 40k. You painted them up, why shouldn't they be special? So many heroes have cool weapons. Morwen Val has the Spear of Illumination. You can have something similar on your own characters. If a Sister Superior's Hand Flamer doesn't seem up to her fellow Dominion's Flamers, upgrade the pistol to have an extra strength and +1 shot. There are 2 Crusade books out at the moment, one focusing on Leviathan, one on the Pariah Nexus, which you may remember from the end of 8th edition and the really cool 9th edition trailer. But the Crusade rules and missions inside can be used with any faction, not just Imperials and Necrons. There is some theming, but that doesn't mean a lot, and you can make your own narrative instead. Playing Crusade means you level up, and also you learn about your units. This is fun! You can pick cool things, you can pick cool stuff that suits the model. If your Reductor Saboteur kept killing enemy characters, upgrade her demo charge to have precision on critical wounds. She got so good at picking out characters she can just chuck a bomb right onto their head. That's fun! If you're playing Crusade right now, you must have a cool story moment like that. You can share it in the comments. And I encourage you to share it in the comments. Crusade also lets you play with models that you don't normally, the ones that aren't meta, the ones you've been told are bad on tier lists. If you have something bad and can figure out how to make it work, that is how you learn an army. That is how you level up your gaming experience. I kept using the index metamorphs and found uses for them. Using a weak unit lets you find other uses. The Adeptus Sororitas Crusaders, they were not that great for things other than actions, and there rarely are actions in Crusade games, but they took on a great position of being the unit I would surrender to suffering and sacrifice in the Hallowed Martyrs detachment. That's a use I wouldn't have found for them if not for Crusade. And you can still use them as Legend units because Legends are allowed in Crusade games. If there was a unit that is considered terrible in 40k, the Genestealer Cult Magos, but you love the unit, you can keep marking them for greatness. They get bonus experience and get more rewards and upgrades sooner, so they can become extra awesome. Or you just give them the Infiltrator upgrade and then they can die faster to let your Xenocrete army avenge the martyrs sooner. Some people will level up their armies faster than others, some people may join Crusade campaigns later. So you calculate your Crusade points. This is yet another thing that Games Workshop has as an acronym that is CP. You know, after command points. Every unit bonus gives at least 1 Crusade point, every scar is -1 Crusade point. Depending on the difference, and there has to be a noticeable difference, the person that is the underdog will get extra bonuses for that battle. And it's bracketed. In 9th edition it was much more punishing to the person with the higher Crusade points because for every 2 Crusade points difference, the opponent got an extra command point. And it wasn't like all on the tabletop benefits and drawbacks, because against non-Crusade players or new Crusade players, a lot of those bonuses may be tied to re-rolling out of action tests, gaining more experience if you do certain things. These have no real on the tabletop effect. So these minor adjustments are so much better, and you can balance someone who has 20 plus Crusade points with someone who's entirely new and wants to start Crusade. They can play against each other, and it's much fairer now than in 9th edition. You can play Crusade weekends, which are where you play lots of Crusade games. You start at 1000 points. For an event you could stay at that level so that you have the same army the whole time, rapidly leveling up. If a unit did get 4 scars and would be deleted, as you know, everyone's dead, they're too messed up to continue, it gets replaced by a new identical unit with suspicious mustaches. When you're playing Crusade games, it is worth actually playing the whole 40k game. A lot of 40k games you play casually, get to turn 3, and then you know who's won, so you just stop and instead talk about the families you haven't seen in a while because you've been so busy painting. In Crusade, it is worth playing games to the end. Maybe you can't win the battle, but you can win the war by killing enemy units to give them battle scar penalties, and you can complete agendas to gain more experience points for your own units. You get to enjoy playing a full 40k game, and it has value and stakes. But there are difficulties with Crusade games. When you finish a Crusade campaign, do you scrap all of the bonuses, or do you keep them for another campaign, which may be against different people? You also want to make sure that you play your Crusade faction against others that don't have Crusade armies for the right reasons, because you want to have fun with a narrative leveling up your force, not because you want to use broken rules because you've picked the absolute best things which make the game a bit unbalanced. There were rules at the start of 10th edition to let you continue with your 9th edition Crusade force, but some of the elements were too strong compared to the 10th edition version. 9th edition was very killy, to the point where an Armor of Contempt rule had to be introduced to let the power armored armies actually survive. Yes, it was so bad that the equivalent of every Space Marine unit had the Armor of Contempt stratagem played on them every single phase. That was needed to just keep them in the game. Same for the Battle Sisters. And there is more noticeable codex creep in 10th edition with Crusade. It's not so bad in competitive 40k where you might have a good index and then your codex will be on roughly the same power, maybe a little bit up, maybe a little bit down. But with Crusade games, having a codex or not does vary what is available to you. So my Adeptus Sororitas Crusade Force has some benefits from the codex. It also has some 9th edition codex updates, some 9th edition supplements, and things like Rules in White Dwarf magazine for the Tome Keepers. Just while I was waiting on the Sisters Codex upgrade so I could play against Tyranid players and Necron players who had codexes with the bonuses. I made my own Crusade roster thing. I preferred this way of tracking things instead of the bigger Crusade cards for each unit that also marks their equipment. If you just play with what the models have, you don't need to remember your basic equipment because it will always be the same. I'll put that in the Von Carmian resources part of my Discord channel, which is linked in the description. But as my sisters have a codex now, I get more cool options specific to my faction rule, like getting extra miracle dice, which a Drukhari player with no codex, they get no bonuses. The Pariah Nexus Crusade book also introduced something that we hoped would be gone from 10th edition, weapons that ignore invulnerable saves. But that's only going to be happening if you're playing a campaign using that Crusade book. Now let's talk more about the missions, because that's supposedly why we're here, not just to have me explain Crusade to you. You can play them even if you don't have the factions that are related to the book. So you don't need a Tyranid or Space Marine army to play with the Leviathan Crusade book. You can play these missions even if you aren't playing Crusade. They are fun, they are different, and if you're still waiting on the Pariah Nexus mission deck to be available, you don't need the mission deck to play. These missions provide actual tactical challenge. It gets easier to play the same game on the same table over and over again with the same kind of objective layout. Regardless of the mission you're playing, it's pretty much always one objective in each deployment zone and 3 objectives in no man's land. But what if the Crusade mission requires you to only hold the center one? What will your army look like if you don't have a home objective to defend? Will you still take units that have sticky objectives in your army? What if there are no objectives? What if the mission is run? This is a varied tactical challenge and each game is different. You don't get the, oh, I've already played supply drop last week. These are new and different when you're trying to have a competitive game. And it makes you think about the strengths and weaknesses of your army and how you can overcome them. How well will your Tau do if they have to do an all-out attack? How well can your Orcs defend 3 objectives for the whole game? Sure, in real wars, generals may focus on the same map of the same city and figure out how to attack or defend it. If you want to play under tournament scenery, it's like the same map every time. But a truly great general will want an army that can adapt, that can attack or defend, and will have adaptable tactics. The Codex Astartes isn't looking so silly now. And you get to try more detachments. If the Anvil Siege Force isn't good for you because it requires being stationary and you usually need to move a lot more in 40k to score objectives and missions, what if you were the defender in a Crusade mission and you had to keep the enemy out of your deployment zone, like on this map? Now you will be staying still. Now you have a situation that massively rewards using that detachment. A detachment that you would not have considered otherwise. There's also a lot more first turn scoring. For some of the missions, you score the primary mission in every battle round, not just on turns 2, 3, 4, and 5, with the person going second scoring at the end of turn 5. This makes the objectives more valuable, especially if you're not going to finish a full game. It massively increases the value of scouting units. They're not valuable because they can perform actions on objectives that are further away in the first turn, if you do draw a secondary mission for it, or because you pick Cleanse as a fixed objective, like a coward. So in Crusade missions, you could scout onto objectives and score primary in the first command phase. So Metamorphs and Dominions look a whole lot better now if they didn't already seem great in their respective codexes. The Warlords mean something. There are more missions and agendas that include slaying the enemy warlord. In regular 40k games, apart from like a secret mission, being a warlord rarely means anything. If you love the mission cards of the Pariah Nexus, or you think they're actually not that great and need more changing up because they're very similar to the Leviathan mission deck, the Pariah Nexus mission cards are the new Crusade book. There has been the Leviathan Crusade book at the launch of 10th edition, and then with the Necron Codex, the Pariah Nexus Crusade book came out. That was the last one. Maybe there will be a Chalnath Crusade book soon, focusing on the Imperial agents, the Tau, the Sisters, and the Genestealer cult of that sector, but we haven't heard anything yet. But in the UK White Dwarf 502, there are rules for getting Crusade points and experience from the mission cards. So if you want to play a Crusade mission, but your opponent really wants to use the Pariah Nexus mission deck because it has just come back into stock, hypothetically, you can play your Crusade force against them using those cards. There are a couple more issues with Crusade, beyond getting the people to be willing to play with you, and part of that is around balance. I found that the Crusade upgrades generally balance themselves out with scars, and there's nothing that's so incredibly game-breaking. Even having a super special melter cannon that fires one extra shot isn't changing the game too much. But with the missions, it's not as great because objective placement is not always equal, but the challenge is important, and losing a game doesn't matter if you aren't tracking it among friends. And I've noticed that some of the missions in the Pariah Nexus Crusade book are badly worded. So mission 1-1, if you're the attacker, you score bonus victory points if at the start of the turn you controlled an objective that your opponent controlled at the start of the battle round, but you go first in that mission. I don't quite understand that one. But there are loads of missions in the books, you don't have to play that one. And these Crusade books also give you quite a bit of lore. In the Pariah Nexus, the Necrons are waking up in force, and they have the stilling, which causes a lot of Imperials to just collapse in their chairs and rot away. Like it's the spoiler from Firefly. That's not actually a spoiler if you haven't seen that older film, but you'll know. This doesn't seem to affect Space Marines as much because they just go for it, and it doesn't affect Battle Sisters as much because they have faith, and Necrons don't understand faith. A lot of the Imperial forces are going in there to stop the Necrons, but the Admech is going in there because Blackstone. Blackstone stops the warp and means that demons could never appear nearby. So foreshadowing is a device used in script writing. Vashtor rocks up with the remnants of his demon version of the Rock. That is the Dark Angel homeworld that went pop at the end of the Horus Heresy. And Vashtor is yet another metal character fighting in this arena. Call finds out that there is a Necron civil war of Imhotep against the Silent King, and Call is like... He works with Inquisitor Draxus and destroys Necron pylons, and a Dolmen Gate gets wrecked. The Silent King's like... I hate you. And throws Honor away and uses planet-chucking weapons, and Call is like... Ah! But then he also uses Dark Age of technology stuff that the Mechanicum definitely doesn't have, like a shockwave cannon that blows up 3 tomb ships, and the Necrons go... Oh! And a big black hole gun is fired, and Necrons go... Ah! And Skitarii go... Oh! And Vashtor is trying to do that weird thing where you reverse the polarity of Blackstone and make it pro-warp. So we have Necrons that want it no warp at all, demons that want full warp on, and the Imperium that want it somewhere in the middle so that they can stay alive, have warp travel work, but not get demoned. Oh. And if you don't like that part of the lore or the sector, you can set your Crusade game anyway. Maybe your factions don't like Blackstone, maybe they like biomass. So they don't eat the rocks, they eat the workers who are going to mine it. The narrative is optional, but the missions are really fun. If you would like to see more Crusade related videos on my channel, let me know. If this isn't for you, also let me know, but try out the missions. They're on Wikipedia if you wanted to give one a go without buying a whole Crusade book. Now you may have noticed a blue bar at the bottom of the screen. That is like the hat from one-man bands put out so you can drop tip money into it. And now we're at the end of the video, it's the bit where you either click the link in the description to go to Ko-fi and tip me, and thank you to all those people who have already signed up to support me monthly, or you don't make eye contact and slink off to another video. Maybe this video, which is about the unique sub-factions that can come from battles under a different narrative. Battle Sisters that use drop pod insertion. But really, I would be happy with a like from someone who has clicked the subscribe button. Have a great day of 40k.